Good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing? I hope you're doing well. Thank you for visiting. I hope you got some coffee, some food. How many of you are parents? Excellent. How many of you are working in the field that you majored in? Pretty accurate. All right. And how many of you have domain expertise that you're willing to share with students? Impact entrepreneurship is what we're kind of focused in. So sharing your expertise with people scalably. As much impact as you can have, alternative education options, things that you recommend to students that might be better lean education than alternatively. What we consider ourselves at Find My Path is a knowledge management platform. We work to put resources from an array of different originalities into pathways for students. So if you want leadership skills, this might not be the best known program, it might not have the highest marketing budget, but if it's recommended through an app like Quora, for example, we can actually democratize access to this information anywhere in the country. So we like to think of ourselves as a Quora meets Google meets LinkedIn. It's a lot of different pieces coming together, but we'll show you why that's important. We want to democratize access to quality information to make that obtainable for average students. You know, the lower 99% who aren't in Harvard, aren't in MIT, the everyday run-of-the-mill people who are looking to improve their education, and open that up to parents. So our platform helps individuals, bring individuals, corporate relations, and academic institutions onto the same page. And we've been recognized as a global entrepreneurship summit by the US State Department and as an emerging social impact entrepreneur. So Quora, LinkedIn, Google. Quora, experts weigh in on advice, answering questions. If you think about it though, it's just typical blog. You know, your answers get lost. There's no, hey, this is the pathway. If you want to learn leadership, read this article, watch this video, attend, this event. Here's a program for you to go through. That's more of how you think of learning, how you approach problem solving, than going to Google and finding 300 million results on how do I get better at leadership. So the next piece is LinkedIn. As you're doing this learning, are you getting recognized for it? Until most students, most learners, before they go into their major professional career, pretty irrelevant on LinkedIn, unfortunately. So articles, videos, books, podcasts, how do we track that learning and how do we reward them for that continuous engagement? So we've broken our value network down into learners, supporters like parents, loved ones, employers, people who want to employ students, your jobs, education providers, schools, and contributors who are all experts, subject matter experts who are willing to contribute. Addressable market, we've got pretty much a maximum, this is a field that kind of loops in a few different industries. We've got corporate training and recruitment, which is about $141 billion annually. US personal advising for college, $50 billion. Global staffing and recruitment also goes into a $416 billion. So there's a lot of money being spent on getting the right candidates, but not a whole lot of money being spent on how do we make them the right candidates. So you see a lot of education spend. $1.3 trillion is just federal loans, not including the other over $1 trillion in private student loans. So we'd like to approach this through a lean learning aspect. These are competitions. We look at Google, we look at LinkedIn, we looked at personality assessments, job posters, and they're all kind of segmented. This isn't how you think. You don't go, I want to be in digital marketing. All right, I guess maybe I'll just go major in marketing and hopefully that'll be what gets me to this job that I really want to work at this company. There's no pathway to get there. So if companies can't communicate and people who know can't communicate that down to students, we get wasted ed spend, we get poor educational pathways, and we get misinformed learning. So back to more of what we do, a lot of big pictures. Knowledge management platform. Scalable recruiting and branding. Companies can share their ideal candidate hires scalably to any student anywhere in the country. Candidate tracking. What are they learning? Are they engaged outside the classroom? Articles, videos, books, podcasts, events such as this. That's more indicative of future success and lower turnover rates than if you graduated with a 3.9 from college. Communications. If you're willing to help people out there, but you can only interact with one a day maximum, that's going to take a lot of time. It's not scalable. So talent pipeline improvements, better communications results in better pipeline or talent improvement. And once they've done this, if you're a company who said, hey, this is what we'd like you to do, what we'd like you to learn, we have better training at that, less training at that point. So we're going through into raising at this point, and happen to open to any questions. Sorry. Thank you, sorry.
Well, let's start with the revenue. So what's
Absolutely.
kind of the financial model of
Absolutely.
the platform?
So we've got a few different areas of revenues. First off, we have subscriptions for companies to better communicate and improve their talent pipelines. That's the equivalent of saying, hey, let's go in, we'll consult, find your best candidates, figure out what the correlation was from their success, what they recommend, provide that to students around the country. It might be that we prefer this program, we might prefer this major, we might prefer this extracurricular events. And that's one realm of getting companies on board. That is also able to be communicated to schools so that corporate communications and partnerships with educational institutions are improved. So we have the other software platform availability to educational institutions. So if you think about a school, basically how it works right now is 20% of their top students come to their advisors and the rest are just hoping that they're making the right decisions. So conveying resources from alumni, from their corporate partners, straight down through the communication chain and opening that up to all students, regardless if you're a crammer, I want to know everything I need to know to get a job in 2 weeks, or if you're the parent who's trying to help facilitate that. So those are the two subscription or larger costs. We try to keep it open and free for learners by saddling some of that cost up upon them. And we also have deep linking partnerships already set in place for LinkedIn, Coursera, Udacity, and a number of other education providers so that we actually get referrals fees from natural learning that's expert recommended. That does not change the recommended location though in the pathway.
Can you go back to your supporters slide?
Yes, supporters.
So are these all essentially different user personas within the platform?
No, so absolutely, great question. So what we've basically devised is a platform that has pathway management. So if you want to contribute to it, I as either a user, a educational institution, or a corporation interact with that same platform. From there, the other side is the learners. That's where we actually have supporters and learners looking at the same thing. So just like you go to Google, you'd see your results, you'd see the pathway to get there. That's the same login or the same visual for both of them. So these are more of our customer segments and our interactions, but still slightly different roles, if that makes sense. So supporters are more trying to make sure students or children or loved ones are making informed decisions, and how can I support them without knowing that field. Employers and education providers are in mass communication attempts. So I hope that answers it.
So that, well,
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
That kind of leads into my next question. So given that this has kind of a community element, there is a certain, at least from a scalability piece, that critical mass,
Absolutely.
Goal down the line, right? So can you talk a little bit about what kind of the go-to-market strategy is? Because obviously you won't have that mass of users from the multiple personas kind of at the early stage. What's kind of and I can clearly see where this is going to evolve to once you get to that critical mass, but what does that path look like from today until reaching that point where it really becomes kind of the ecosystem that you've created?
Absolutely. So two main avenues for approach are you can either go the educational institution sales route. You think about getting in there, you get a lot of students very quickly, access to a lot of alumni. The data metrics we supply on those students, life cycle metrics is what we call them, to aggregate success. Very important, but educational institutions are a tough sell. That's pretty natural. So opening that up, making it a community element so that corporations and individuals can start contributing is kind of the fallback of, okay, well, I know that you're excellent in law. I know Keith might be excellent in finance. I know that a number of individuals in this area might be great in the entrepreneurship, great in HR, great in leadership. So enabling them to share into the public spectrum is where we open it up to make sure that we're growing one way or the other, if that makes sense. Now and we have a revenue stream tied to each one, if that helps. Why we're building that critical mass.
Right.
Trey, so I'm just full disclosure. I've known Trey a while, and we've talked a lot about this platform. And I see these. I would just say on the presentation, I think I'd take this slide and identify the pain points for each of these people.
Absolutely.
Because like I've two in college, one at American, by the way, for our previous presenter. And so as a parent, I'm in that supporter group, so I know what the pain points of that is, which is I don't want to have to pay an extra 2 years of tuition, right? And I see it also at we've talked a lot about this at our alma mater, the way they approach recruiting is just not scalable. It's, go down the street, take your resume, and, you need to be able to reach vastly more people. And then the biggest thing, I had, and Trey and I've talked about this, but I taught 400 level finance at the college last semester, and out of 12 students, I had 4 go into Masters of Accountancy. And I was like, how does that happen, right? So these 4 people really decided that they want to go incur $30,000 more debt, and they've never even been inside of an accounting firm. And what that is professors that are very good and very well intentioned, but are having undue sort of influence on those students' path. The other thing I see a lot of that, and I don't think College of Charleston is any different than any other school, but I see us bringing in companies, and typically we're bringing in the C-level or sort of high-level executive, and they're recruiting for jobs that probably will be done by a computer in 10 years. So we're kind of setting these kids up like, well, this was a great career path 30 years ago, but today it might not exist. So one of the ideas we talked about is, can you democratize, like Trey said, can you get feedback from the C-suite, middle management, internship, all the way across, so that I can see, from the various levels what might be coming down the road. So anyway, I just think I would start maybe more with the pain points, because there's pain points in all these places that you guys are trying to solve, and I think that would make it a little clearer, but it's definitely there.
We absolutely agree that adaptive learning, so how can I influence the lean learning or the curriculum that you're going through as it's updating? If you think about it getting into a school, there's a process. It goes through a board, it goes through voting, it goes through implementation, and then it goes in that semester. If you've passed that class, you missed that opportunity. So providing somewhere where that scalable, weigh in from people at different levels, where you can make sure that you're getting a well-rounded version of advice on how to pursue that pathway, we absolutely agree. Adaptive, lean learning. So reduce your costs, save 2 semesters if possible. Yeah.
And one other thing too is all these departments, especially inside the schools, they all have their own silos of people, right?
Yes.
And then they have silos of software, and it's always that 2 or 3% that don't talk to each other, which is why, you might go to a career development center at a college and they say, oh, we already have that. We bought XYZ from Blackbaud. Well, that's great, but it doesn't talk to admissions. It doesn't talk to alumni and institutional advancement. So there's so much you could solve, particularly for the colleges, but if you can't solve it for them, it's better just to solve it externally.
Absolutely. So our process, it does bring in all of those areas. So we do assessments for recruitment, for admissions, for advising. We do matching to help facilitate which school or area you should be going into. Learning should be your pathway, what you should be supplementing with, and then the ability to apply so you can actually go through the corporate relations side. So that, in the school we have 2 different, I know this isn't unique, but at the College of Charleston we have 2 different career services groups, one for a business school, one for the general students. There's a lot of miscommunication or even no communication at some point. So we found that communication, if you think about it as a chain, corporate people might know, they want to share that with the school. They reach out to someone at the school, that person directs them to the right person, that person hopefully interacts with a student, and that student hopefully interacts with their parent. So those are all pieces of the chain that can be basically broken. So in our model, that's why we put ourselves at the center, so that if an employer shares something, it's accessible to each group. If an education provider or an expert supplies it, it's automatically up on that platform. There's no chance of a breakdown in communication ever occurring. So adaptive, it's instant, it's scalable, communications are improved drastically. There's about a 5% chance as a parent you'll find out the right information from your student, if that makes sense. By the time, there's a 20% chance at every level that it'll break down, or in a game of telephone, get misconstrued. So it's a much bigger problem than is instantly realizable, but when you start thinking about it, you're like, yeah, that shouldn't be the way that it goes. I don't want 300 million results. I want the next 10 that I should consume, where they're from, and I want to know that they're for a purpose. So.
All right, Trey Taylor,
Thank
ladies and gentlemen, 5 by 5.
Thank you.